All right, so we're going to continue where we left off looking at this problem. And here's what some of our sort of discussion yesterday about this card game problem. That it turned out that we did, in fact, let me just get my pen here and I'm going to change the color of this pen to red. It turned out that we did use our example and the GitHub help page to help us get, for example, this link right here. Helped us to get a lot of the code here that we needed. Okay, today what I want to look at is this part. And so let me just change the color here a little bit. Again, today we're going to create some arrays, and you'll notice here the word parallel array. So I'll talk about what I mean by that. For the values of the arrays, the type, the suit, and even the image files. So that's what we're going to start with, is doing something like that today. Oh, and do I see? Yeah, Levi's on. So I'm just going to change Levi's attendance to present, which makes everybody present today. Good. Okay, so that's what we're going to do today with our example, is that. Okay, we can go and look at this part, the sort of how it's going to run later. But maybe we'll take a look at one part of this right now. Let's have these words right here appear in our little input box, because we've already got the input box up and running. But let's change that so that instead of just enter stuff, it actually has that, the actual content in there. Now there's lots of ways we could do that. The way I think I'm going to do it is I'm going to, inside this little method, make a string variable called the menu. Menu equals. And then in this menu, I can write things like to see information about a card, enter, and then a couple new line characters, card number 1 to 52, and then a new line character, and maybe the B for the back, and then a new line character, or maybe a Q to quit. So if that's my menu, I can place that inside my input dialog. Now, you're right, I could just put all this text right here inside of there, but I'm just sort of doing it in two steps here, right? So this is the text play in the input dialog. That's what that is. This variable down here we made yesterday is remembers what the user enters the dialog. That's what's remembering it, this variable here. So let's just run that and see how that changed that input dialog. Okay, that looks pretty good. To see information about a card, enter the card number 1 to 52. I got to fix that typo there and Q to quit. But it does look pretty good. Like that's kind of on the right idea there. So fix my typo, and maybe I'll put a new line at the end just because it was kind of crowded. But this is just a personal thing, just to get that up and running kind of the way you want it to run. So I like that. That looks pretty good for me. That's how I'm going to have that ready to go. So then I can kind of see that I've kind of, I can now create this thing. This thing is created the way I want it to be created. I'm also going to change up slightly the way this loop works here. Instead of just equals, I know that with strings, there's another version of equals which ignores the upper and lowercase letters. So instead of just Q, it can use both lowercase and uppercase Q. So I'm going to use that version. Equals, come on, it was just up there. Ignore case. So let's see how that works. So now I can probably use a lowercase q to also quit the program. So lowercase q, thanks for using it. Okay, so that worked pretty good. Okay, so that's a good thing there. Okay, now remember the loop, what it's for is loop makes the program run more than once. If I didn't have this loop in here, if I didn't have it at all, this loop didn't exist. Don't do this to your example. If the loop didn't exist and I just had this line where I got their input, then the program might still work once, right? It would say, welcome to Card Game Simulator. So I would do what I need to do right here, but then it would quit immediately. So the reason for the loop is that it continually brings up that menu until they hit quit. Once they hit quit, we have other parts of our program that we put in yesterday, because once the program is done running, then it will end the program and show the little goodbye screen at the end. That's already done for us, so we don't have to worry about that part getting done. Okay, so this part here, it gets the user's choice of what they want to do. Like, do they want to see a card, do they want to see the back, or do they want to quit? And then the loop itself continues from there. So to me, this program is now done. Okay, it's the main, what was this? It was the main logic for this application. In other words, called an app or the program itself. Application is sometimes just shortened to app. Okay, so this is the main logic for this app. Okay, like we kind of already laid out there. All right, so now we got a little more to do right here. Once we got the user's choice, let's display that choice. Let's make a little display method right here. Well, we got to think for a second, what are we going to display? Well, we need to know what they entered. So we need to know what their input was. Did they say the back of the card, or did they say a number? So this will be passed over to this method as a parameter. I'm going to pass this into the method. But another thing I'm going to need is I'm going to need all the cards. I'm going to need something to store all the cards. So let's jump up in here a little bit. Let's create arrays, multiple arrays, okay, or what we call parallel arrays. Can't spell that word well. Okay. Why are we creating these arrays? To store all the information about the cards. What would that information be? Well, what suit they're in, what type of card it is. Like, you know, like is it a king? We also need to know what value the card holds. Like, you know, if it's a game where, you know, like blackjack, where ace is worth 21 points, that might be, or pardon me, 11 points, that would be interesting. And what image to display. So we need to store information about these cards. So we're going to use arrays for this. We're going to make a string array. Okay, we're going to use the brackets to indicate this is an array for all the card, let's just call it all the suits. It equals a new string array. And here I need to put what the size of that array is. Well, rather than just type the number there, let's just back up one line and let's make a final int deck size, the size of this deck of card. So your first thought is it's 52, right? And then I can place this variable right here that we're going to have 52 cards. what a deck is, but then we also have to add the one card that is the back of the deck. So I'm just going to let the computer do the math, or I could just type a 53 right here. That's what it means. It is all the cards in the back of the card, because that's one of the options there. Okay, so that's what that variable's for. So that's an array of all the suits. Now I'm going to make another one, another string, okay, of all the types. And you know what? This is what I mean by it's a parallel array. It is the exact same size. That's what essentially a parallel array means. Well, then let's make another one for the values. All the values. So what suit, okay, what type, what value, and even the images that I'm going to use. All the images for all these. So this is a whole bunch of arrays, 4 of them, 4 arrays that store all the information theoretically of all the cards. But they're not filled, they're just empty arrays. So I'm going to fill the arrays now. I'm going to fill the arrays with all the correct information. Now I can do that right here on this next line of code, but I think I'm going to send that to a method to do that. Now I could call the method fill, but I'm going to use a card analogy. I'm going to call it sort, or I'm going to actually use the word shuffle. That's very much like a card word there. I'm going to shuffle all the suits. That might be misleading because I'm not going to put them in random order. I'm going to put them in order. And all the suits, all the types, values, all the images. So that will be my method to shuffle. Similarly, all the suits, types, values, and images will be needed when I display this thing. Okay? When I display this particular piece of user input, I'm going to need all these things in order to display it. So after I put them in order, then each time I go through the loop, it will do that. So that's one solution to this problem. It is also possible that you could have these things as potentially global variables, so then you don't have to pass them from method to method. They would just be available for all the methods. I'm going to go with this scenario here. I'm going to create these arrays, these parallel arrays. And is that how you spell parallel? I'm just going to check my thing here, parallel arrays. I feel like I've misspelled the word parallel. I did. It's only one R in parallel. These parallel arrays, okay? And now I've got 2 more methods to create, shuffle and display. So actually, let's map out which kind of methods we have so far. Let me make this a little bit smaller. We have a method called main. Main calls a method called start. So main calls start. It also calls a method called program that we've been working on here. Okay, and it also calls a method called, and you can see this if I go all the way up to main, okay, there it is right there. It calls a method called start, program, and end. So that was this one here, end. Now start ends up calling output. It calls that particular method. And again, this is just a quick review of methods. It calls output, okay? And when it calls output, you'll notice it passes a string of text to it. So it's now passing information into this method, and that information is a string. Okay, now we'll get to output in a minute. End also calls output. So end also does this. So I'll just sort of join that right there. So end also goes into output and passes that string of text. Now, what about output? Well, output uses a show message dialog, but it also calls a method called format area. Format a certain area. This is what makes it look a little fancier. This is the code we looked at the end of the arrays unit. And format area requires some text to be passed over into it. Because what format area does is it sets up this fancy J text area, and it uses the text to put it in there. So anyways, it similarly also accepts a string of information. Okay, so there's that method, format area. Now let's go back to program. Well, that's the one we have down here at the bottom. So program, the method, is going to call something called shuffle. So there's going to be a method that we're going to use called shuffle that we've been making that we haven't built yet. So program is going to go over to shuffle, and it's going to send it some information, a bunch of string arrays. So it's not a string, it's an array of strings. And there's not one of them, there's 4 of them. 4 string arrays are going to get passed to this method. You can see that right here. 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. Then it's going to call this method input. And again, we didn't have to create this method input. It was created for us. We copied and pasted it. And the method input required us to give it a string of information to display. We were using a menu, but it was still a string of text that input uses. Now, if we were to look at input, it also uses format area. Oh, okay. So then it uses that to make it look fancy. So input also goes to format area. So that method itself is used by both input and output. Okay, back to program. Then further down program, we create, and we haven't finished it yet, we're going to make a method called display. And display, so the thing about display is it also requires those string arrays. So actually, let me move this down a little bit. Down. Go. And it also requires just a regular string as well. I'm trying to make this efficient for you guys, but anyways. So it required a string, and it required the 4 string arrays as well. And you can see that right here. There's the string, and then there's the 4 string arrays. Okay. Now, these are all the methods that we've been building. However, in terms of ones we've actually had to write, it was just this one. So I'm going to color this one a slightly different color. Display is one we're going to have to write. Shuffle is one we're going to have to write. We haven't written those yet. And program, believe it or not. This one called program right here. This is one we have to write and have written. These are the only ones we've had to write. All the rest of these ones that you see in blue right here, well, those were done for us, right? They were kind of done automatically for us. by copying and pasting that code yesterday. So far we actually haven't written that much. We've only written program. This is the one, this one right here, program, that actually is done. So I'm actually going to make that one a slightly different color as well. This one is actually done. We've done program. Shuffle and display we still have to do. So that's where we're at in terms of this problem itself. Is reusing methods is definitely useful. This isn't our methods unit. This is our arrays unit. You can see here we're going to use 4 different arrays to solve this. But by using the methods, it has made our life a little bit easier here. Okay. So going back to the start of program, we have text to display. We put that in a final, a little constant. We have a variable that remembers what the user is going to be entering. We made a little constant for the back, for the size of this deck. We made 4 arrays that are going to store all the information. We're going to put that information inside those arrays in this method called shuffle. And then we're going to use a loop to keep getting what the user wants to do and then displaying that choice until they quit. So now we're going to create a method called shuffle. And we're going to create a method called display. Because we are now done with this method called program. It's finished. Okay. And now we can work on shuffle and display. Because this is pretty long, I'm actually going to separate these a little bit down like this, just so that this method is, is kind of easier for you guys to see. And I'm going to do the same with display here. I'm going to make these parameters kind of each on their own line. That's not necessary. You don't need to do that with your methods. It's just going to make it easier for you guys to see these 2 methods. I'm going to take a second to comment these methods. What does shuffle do? It puts all the card information into all the arrays. That's what it does. Suits is array the suit data. And what is the suit data? Well, suits can be hearts, spades, diamonds, and clubs. And if you're not familiar with cards, that's what they are. And I'm not even going to bother saying array. We know it's an array. It stores the suit data. Okay. What do types do? Where's the suit types? So what types could it be? Well, it could be a ace, king, a queen, a jack, or the numbers 2 to 10. Those are the numbers. There's cards that are numbered 2 to 10. So for example, it could be a 2 of clubs. It could be a queen of spades. What about the values? Well, the value of a okay. So that stores the suits. This stores types. This stores values. So values could include things like, whoops. So the value of a card could be 0, because I also want to point out that there's also the back of the card. We can't forget about the back of the card. It is one of the options that they could have, right? You could have the back of the card as an option. So for that, I'll give it a value of 0, 1, all the way up to, say, 10. So face cards like king and queen could be 10, and maybe even 11 for the ace, or maybe the ace is a 1. So I think I'm going to make the ace a 1, but we can worry about that later. So it's 0 to 10 would be my values. And then the images, what would it store there for images? Well, it would be the folder / the path to get there. I have to go to the C drive and then the desktop. It would store the name, right? And we downloaded those yesterday. So it might be the name, and the name is really a number, right? Like 0 is the back of the card. 52 is the king of whatever. And then the what's called the extension, like that. I think they're PNG files. Okay. So that's what those arrays are going to store. Okay, it's going to put all the information into those arrays. When it shuffles it, it's going to do that. When it displays it, it's also going to do all this stuff. So I could theoretically copy and paste all this stuff over here. What is user input? This is the card or the back of the card. The user wants to see. That's what they want. What will this method display do? It will show the user all the information and the graphic in a dialog. Which, if we go back to the way this is supposed to look, it's going to look like this, right? It's going to display all this information and the image or the graphic in a dialog. Well, the good news is we kind of already have a way to kind of do that. But I will be showing you guys that as we fill out these methods, shuffle and display. So we finished program, that's all done. So I'm sort of slowly scrolling here for those of you that are going to go back on the video to get this code. And tomorrow, doing shuffle and hopefully display. But I didn't want to go too long today. It's already almost 10:30. And I wanted to kind of cut that off today for you guys. My speakers have gone to sleep, so I'll have to wake those up in a second. But I wanted that there for you guys so that that's kind of showing you the problem solving for this problem so far. There, I hope that woke up my speaker and you guys have been talking to me. So, speaker check. There we go. So that's where we're at right now with comments in place. Okay, the shuffle method and the display method will be stuff we're going to do tomorrow. As a matter of fact, let's just take 1 second here with display. What we'll be doing with display is actually not that difficult. If you think about it, what we'll be doing for this when we display this is we'll be checking. They want the back of the card, a specific number. We have to check. So that's going to be right. If they want this, if they want that. Or did the user give us bad input? Right? So it's possible when they run this program, they don't do what they're told. Like users don't always do that. So when they're told, enter a number between 1 and 52, or a B, or a Q, that they enter something bizarre right here. Like, for example, the letter H right here. Well, that would be something dumb that the user did right there. Or what if they entered a number like 75? So we need to deal with that bad input there. But eventually, once we get it, we're going to display the good inputs in the dialog. So that might be, once again, using that output method. So it's possible, if I go here, that display will, in fact, call output again. So display will, oops, let me do that again. Go up to here. We'll connect to and also show an output. I think that would be a good thing to at least experiment with right here before we wrap up today. Let's output that will show this thing called user input. I will show that. I'll figure out how tomorrow, but will that work for me displaying it? Let's kind of see what that does. So let's say the user entered 34. It will show 34. Oh, okay. B, it will show B, okay? If I put in a weird thing, that's the one I'll have to deal with my if statement. So that will be kind of how it will work, okay? In theory, when I get to here. But that's where I'm going to stop today for you guys, right? I'm going to stop there today and stop the recording right here.